time, we just want to move straight into our program for the day. And once again, I just want to welcome all of you to the June edition of the FNSWG. And I'm hoping that we are going to, as usual, we are going to have some interesting discussions that pertains to the food and nutrition situation of our region, as we are in the most strategic time. I guess it's a time where we just are having assessments, and for some countries they've completed assessments. So I think we need to know what's around the region and plan on what needs to be done. So I think it's quite interesting that we are meeting in such a time, and I'm hoping the discussions that we are going to have today will give us an indicator of an improved indicator of how the situation is evolving across the region. And I guess that is going to help in informing the key decisions that different policymakers have to make. So just so we can all familiarize with the agenda that we have for today, we'll start by having um, an update on food security and agriculture. And then we are also going to have a quick update on markets, price and markets updates for the region. And then we certainly are going to have an update on specific countries of concern in the region, and WF is going to provide that. Then this is going to be followed by a nutrition update, and as usual, we are going to have um, items under AOB, and so far we have one quick discussion, which is on resilience thematic session. I know last year we did quite a lot um, on resilience, and there were specific um, kind of agreements that we made on that. So we just want to find out if we are still on the same page. So we certainly are going to have a quick discussion on that so that we know what to plan for. Um, I think in general, this is how our agenda is looking like. So if there's anyone with any AOB which is not listed on the on our current agenda, kindly um, text that on the chat box, and then we can make sure that we include that as we come to the end of the session. So without wasting much time, we just want to go straight into the food security and agriculture update, and Sipo is going to provide us a quick update on that. Over to you, Sipo.
Thank you. Thanks, Godfrey. I'm going to be delivering today's food security and agriculture update in the absence of Curation. And I'm just going to go straight to the next slide. See. So when we're looking at the regional overview, we see that much of Southern Africa is still expected to have dry conditions throughout throughout the June to August period, and this is something that's typical of the lean season. And a below average harvest and worsening macroeconomic conditions across the region are expected to severely limit harvest improvements and harvest prospects, although improved food security conditions are observed over the region as a whole following the harvest period, because of factors such as the impact of the Russia-Ukraine crisis, insecurity in Mozambique, and multiple weather shocks that we've experienced throughout the season, and also global economic shocks that we've also experienced, which have led to a below average agricultural output in the region. However, food security food security concerns do remain over conflict-affected areas such as Mozambique, and areas where severe weather conditions have disrupted cropping activities and planting activities, and resulted in major crop losses throughout the season. We also note a serious outbreak of quelea birds that is affecting sorghum, millet, rice, and other crops in Tanzania, Zimbabwe, and Botswana. We will have a more in-depth slide on this later on in the presentation. So that's the regional overview. And if we move to this next slide, we just wanted to highlight maize prices within the region for this meeting. So the 2022 maize harvests was below average due to it in Southern Africa overall. It was below average due to a delayed start of the agricultural season and also occurrences of dry spells and other hazards. When we look at maize grain price trends, we see that they are mixed but generally stable as harvesting for the season commenced. And the impact of surging global food and fuel prices, we see that has put some pressure and is driving inflation across the region. And when we take a look at Malawi, we see that maize grain prices have increased, and this may be due to the government's increase of floor prices of maize, and also partially to the government's farm gate price, which is set much higher than the market price. This also may be attributed to higher costs of fuel and fertilizers, which have also put some pressure on prices. But prices are generally higher than last year's average and also higher than the 5-year average. And in January 2022, authorities in Malawi introduced an export ban, which was prompted by the delay of the onset of rains, as we know, during the 2021-2022 season as well. So all of these factors may be contributing to the high maize grain prices within Malawi. And if we take a look at Madagascar, we see that prices of local rice have declined, and this is a seasonal decline. But if we look at imported rice prices, we see that they are generally stable because of improved availability, of course, following harvest. However, imported rice prices are typically lower than locally produced rice. These were above the 2021 average due to currency depreciation and rising international rice prices, and multiple consecutive droughts, as we know, coupled with an atypically long lean season amidst the above average prices and below average labor demand and significantly below average maize harvest are driving IPC Phase 3 crisis outcomes across the Grand Sud. And if we take a look at Mozambique, we also see that prices increased atypically, and this may be due to the delay in harvest and below average supply in some areas of the country, which are attributed to the impacts of multiple adverse weather shocks that have affected the country throughout the agricultural season. And in Mozambique, maize prices are lower in selected markets compared to the last 1 to 6 months, while they are higher than the 1-year level, except for in the Maputo region. Delayed harvests and crop losses due to weather conditions and conflicts in parts of Mozambique still continue to sustain higher maize prices during a period where maize prices are typically low. And Mozambique has seen a rise as well in fuel prices, and this is attributed to the Ukraine-Russia crisis. For South Africa, wholesale prices of maize, they have increased steeply for the second consecutive month in April, resulting in a record high yellow maize price. White maize prices although they have also increased slightly, remain below the all-time highs of early 2016, and the recent increases are mostly driven by high international benchmark prices, of which these were already elevated before the Russia-Ukraine crisis. However, generally prices remain above the 2021 average and the 5-year average, and annual headline inflation was at 5.9%. And if we take a quick look at Tanzania, we see that monthly maize grain prices displayed mixed trends, increasing in major consumption markets, but stable, and also we observed a decline in other markets. For Tanzania, inflation increased by 3.8%, driven by an increase in transport costs, putting pressure on prices as in Tanzania. If we take a look at Zambia, we see that price for maize grain increased seasonally between March and April, which was a faster rise when compared to the previous year. It partly reflects expectations of a smaller harvest in 2022, and consequently tighter domestic supplies for the 2022-2023 season. However, the strengthening of the national currency in 2022 will help to avert the effects of higher international prices and also assist in tempering inflationary pressure. Zambia will not expect maize from its current harvest until the end of September, to ensure that it has enough stock for local consumption. And if we take a look at Zimbabwe, we see that maize grain and maize meal prices increased atypically due to shortages from the delayed and also below average agricultural season. The government also removed import duties on food imports to put a downward pressure on prices. The Zimbabwe government has also suspended for the next 6 months its import duty on basic commodities, and this is meant to counter escalating and unjustified price increases of locally manufactured products. In order to cushion consumers, certain products such as rice and flour and so on will now be imported duty-free. When we take a look at the outlook from May onwards, we see that prices are expected to decline seasonally after harvest. However, localized grain deficits are expected as reduced domestic surplus in South Africa and Zambia is anticipated to continue to push up food prices. However, regional demand for white maize is expected to be above average due to anticipation of below average harvests in the region, and rising international benchmark prices and increasing domestic fuel costs are expected to put an upward pressure on prices. And if we take a closer look at commodity prices, and the surge that has come about because of the Russia-Ukraine crisis. The crisis, of course, continues, and its impacts are being felt all the way in Southern Africa. And this is particularly of concern because it also comes at a time where we've experienced other adverse weather during the season, which has affected production and prices, as we are seeing. So the prices of wheat and fertilizers, they continue to rise as a result of the Russia-Ukraine crisis, and we are seeing record highs in several countries. And if we consider the fact that the sub-region is a net importer of cereal, these high levels reflect the steeply rising international benchmark prices. Maize prices increased in most countries prior to the main harvest period, although seasonal price decreases are normal between April and May. Rising international benchmark, higher fuel costs, and expectations of a reduced harvest could limit these expected seasonal declines. And quickly, if we can take a look at some of the major factors which are driving the rising agricultural commodity prices. We have identified three main drivers, and this includes the ongoing war between Russia and Ukraine. And as well as policy actions in response to surging prices in some major producing countries, such as the ban of palm oil exports from Indonesia and wheat exports from India. The animal disease outbreaks, which are typical this time of year, will also have an effect on prices. And this includes outbreaks of avian influenza, foot and mouth disease, and as we are seeing now, also quelea bird outbreaks. If we take a closer look at fertilizer prices, we see that global fertilizer market was already under severe stress before the Russia-Ukraine crisis, and fertilizers have also reached an all-time high, both globally and in domestic markets, as a result of the Russia-Ukraine crisis. As we know, Southern Africa is highly import dependent when it comes to fertilizers. South Africa, Zambia, Tanzania are the key suppliers of maize in the region, and all of these countries are highly import dependent, with South Africa importing 50% of its fertilizer consumption, importing 50% of its fertilizer consumption needs. And we see that data from the International Fertilizer Industries Association says that between 2015 and 2019, there was no production of nitrogen, potassium, and phosphorus fertilizers in Tanzania and Zambia. And this means that these two countries are, of course, highly dependent on imports. And the further rise of fertilizer prices will, of course, translate to lower yield prospects and, of course, higher prices, as we are starting to see. And this slide just shows the trend or changes in maize prices in Malawi, Mozambique, and Zambia. We see that some markets in Malawi and Mozambique and Zambia as well have recorded very extremely high increases in maize prices over the past year. If we take a look at current maize supply and trade trends, we see that the regional maize net supply position at the beginning of May 2021-2022 was above the 5-year average and higher than the 2020-2021 levels, despite an average export performance in May 2021-2022. Regional maize closing stocks are likely to be above average. Maize grain and meal flowed from surplus to deficit areas in the region during May 2021-2022 through formal and informal trade, except for in Zimbabwe, where internal grain flows were controlled. And given the projected average regional production in 2022, combined with the above average closing stocks in May 2021-2022, the regional supply during the upcoming 2022-2023 period is expected to be average, and maize availability within the region is expected to remain adequate to cover demand in 2022-2023. But access, especially among import-dependent countries, may remain constrained by high prices at source markets. And import-dependent countries such as Botswana, Namibia, Lesotho, and Eswatini will continue to import from large producers within the region. And quickly, just to highlight transboundary pests and diseases, a serious outbreak of quillia birds has been observed in Tanzania, in 15 districts within Tanzania, and it is affecting sorghum, millet, rice, wheat crops in the country. In May, the government of Tanzania requested emergency support from FAO in order to contain the pest. And FAO has, of course, released $500,000 to support ground and aerial operations in order to control the pest. Although more resources and funding, of course, are needed in order to effectively control the pest and to heighten early warning interventions and community-based IPM approaches. The pest has also been reported in Botswana as well as Zimbabwe. But the serious outbreak is, of course, noted in Tanzania. Thank you. Over to you, Godfrey.
Thanks very much, Sipho, for that detailed presentation. And maybe since we had asked Jones to provide another quick update on markets and prices, maybe we could just allow him to talk through, and whatever questions we have, we can reserve them, and then we make sure that after that second presentation, we ask them, since some of the areas are more like related. So I'm going to allow Jones to immediately give us a quick presentation on markets and prices. Over to you, Jones.
Thank you, Godfrey, and thanks, Sipho, for providing some background there. And there is considerable overlap between what Sipho presented and what I'm going to share. I will simply add some additional value and updates, so you have a view of some of the dynamics at play at the current moment. Let's move to the next slide, Sipho. Okay, Sipho also shared one of these graphs of the FAO Food Price Index. We have those two charts on the left. The top chart shows the main price index. The red one represents the 2022, which is way above what we experienced in the previous year, 2021. Fortunately, the last 2 months, we've observed a decline in the price index, which is good news. This was led primarily by declines in the vegetable and dairy price indices. The cereal and the meat price actually increased between April and May. And what we can see is in the bottom chart, we see the specific indices, the trends for vegetable oils, cereals, dairy, sugar, and meat. The decline in the vegetable oil index is quite sharp, and it has supported the decline in the overall food price index. But as I mentioned, the cereals index is showing that elevation. It's trending upwards together with the meat index. The international wheat prices increased in May, and they remain above previous year levels, mostly because of some of the actions being taken by export countries such as India, which announced an export ban. The cropping conditions also in the US and in Europe have not been very good. We know production in Ukraine is also expected to be low this season. By contrast, within this cereal price group, coarse grain prices declined, and this is mainly due to improved supplies from Argentina and the imminent start of the main harvest in Brazil. As I mentioned, for vegetable oils, we have had the removal of the export ban on palm oil by Indonesia. The ban was short-lived. We also have observed the accumulation of sunflower stocks in Ukraine, and also sluggish demand for soy and rapeseed oil. These have pushed prices for the vegetable oil price index downwards. Let's move to the next slide, Sipo. I want to continue with these updates on commodity prices, focusing on crude oil as well as fertilizers. Sipo also did mention a little bit about fertilizer. I'll touch on that as well. But what we are observing is the crude oil market is very fluid. Prices increased in May. Sorry, there's a typo there. They increased in May, and they even continued to increase in the first week of June. We know China is coming back following the lockdown, and demand is expected to rise in China as industrial production also picks up. But supply may also be challenged because the sanctions on Russia are likely to take full force in the coming outlook period. So demand is going to rise as China comes into the market. So prices for crude oil are expected to remain high. Fortunately, or unfortunately, last week the Feds hiked the interest rates. They brought in one of the sharpest increase in the rates not seen in the past 28 years. And this helped to tame the rise in oil prices. We had reached above $120 per barrel, but prices reduced immediately following the rate hike by the Feds. But by and large, prices remain high and above average. And we know for our region, this does not look good in terms of cost of transportation and the secondary impact on food costs. In terms of fertilizer, Sipo did talk about some of these trends in fertilizer prices. The changes, the monthly changes show, yes, urea, ammonia, DAP prices have reduced month on month, but they remain quite high compared to year earlier levels. And the main concern here is use of fertilizer is likely to decline. We know maize prices are high. Farmers are less likely to use fertilizer at normal application rates. Yields are therefore expected to suffer, and we are yet to see how much that was a factor in the upcoming harvest. But going forward, we anticipate yields will take a bit of a knock because of high fertilizer prices. Next slide, please. Here I'm continuing again with the commodity price dynamics for maize, rice, and wheat. The maize graph, that chart on the left, is showing that yes, in the Gulf of Mexico and Argentina, prices were stable month on month, but for South Africa, SAFEX prices were quite responsive month on month. Prices went up 12% for yellow maize in May and 9% for white maize. And this does not look good for us in the region, given our heavy dependence on maize for food. There's also a strong dependence on maize for feed. In terms of rice, prices have been stable for quite some time, but we are seeing consistent monthly increases. This month, the month of May is showing further increases. I think this is the third or fourth month of consecutive monthly increases in the price of rice. Some countries have been importing or over-importing rice as a substitute for consumption of bread. We know the story for bread on the extreme right is much worse. So we have been seeing some substitution of rice for wheat in a number of countries. But prices for rice have started also creeping upwards. As for wheat, we can see there is a general increase month on month in SAFEX markets, as well as in Europe, Canada, and in Argentina. Prices are way above last year and average levels. That line graph there is showing the average level percentage increase for the month of May. The Black Sea markets are showing stable prices month on month and even lower prices. I don't know if you can see the Black Sea May price averaged at $390 per ton compared to the European price of $440 per ton. So there is a discount to be made through imports from the Black Sea region. But we know switching, there are logistical issues in getting wheat from the Black Sea region, and switching for alternative export markets is difficult for a number of countries in our region which have been depending on imports from Ukraine and Russia, simply because the price, if you decide to go to Argentina, the price is higher. And also the freight costs are higher, simply because of the increases in fuel costs. So wheat is becoming a very difficult commodity for our region. The price of bread has gone up. Previously, we have had the feed industry utilizing considerable levels of wheat for feed. But what we are seeing now is the feed industry going back to maize. And this could be fueling part of the rise in the price of maize that we are seeing in the region. Next slide, please. Just to give a bit of local flavor on what's happening on maize prices, we did discuss what was happening in South Africa. We saw those increases in May. For Zimbabwe, we are observing further increases in prices. Sipho did mention that the region experienced poor start and some extended mid-season dry spells, which has led to reduced harvest. I think for a number of countries, we are going to experience below average production levels for maize. South Africa, yes, it's slightly above average, but certainly 10% lower than what we observed last year. What has been common among a number of countries and markets in the region, Tanzania, Zimbabwe, Zambia, and Malawi, and not to mention South Africa, prices in May actually increased. Typically, remember, we are going through harvest when supplies are supposed to be improving, yet prices are increasing at this very moment. So what has been happening is we have a severe drought conditions in East Africa. And traders are reaching out as far as Malawi and Zambia to source maize for East Africa. We know Kenya has been relying on imports also from Uganda and Ethiopia. Production in Ethiopia was affected by drought. Uganda has put in grain export restrictions. So traders are now coming into Malawi and Zambia to source products for the East Africa markets. So we are not surprised that prices are rising at a time of harvest when we expect prices to actually come down. This year is very peculiar. Prices are not coming down. This is a very important key message, and the lean season could be even coming much earlier than normal. So prices will keep elevated, and the normal decline is going to be very short. If we do have it, prices are going to continue above. Fortunately for Madagascar, maize prices have been falling, as shown in that chart, and they've fallen for the second consecutive month. Next slide, please. So the consequences of high fuel and high food prices is the rise in inflation rates. We are seeing inflation rising in a number of countries. The chart on the left is identified inflation trends for South Africa, Madagascar, Mozambique, Tanzania, and Zimbabwe. The Zimbabwe inflation figures are they are plotted on the right side on the secondary axis of that left graph. So even in South Africa, inflation levels are rising beyond what we had right around the start of the COVID pandemic. The levels continue rising. In the last 2 months, we have seen Mozambique inflation levels also rising considerably. So is the case for Tanzania, despite having abundant and multiple staples, inflation levels are also rising, mostly because of fuel. The energy costs are rising. Our region is a net importer of fuel and gas, so it's not surprising that the transport index or transport sub-index is rising, and with that, it's pulling everything else with it. The headline inflation levels are rising, and the consequences of this are quite serious. Um, we know the poor spend a considerable amount of their budgets on food and transport, and rising inflation levels will erode the disposable income of the most vulnerable segments of our population. And with that, we know it could fuel social unrest in our regional economies. That's something to watch as we go in the next months. There is also a new potential source of risk that is emerging. We know the Feds and the ECB are considering further increases in interest rates. This is likely to increase borrowing costs for a lot of our regional economies. We know the engagements with the IMF, the World Bank, even with China, are being accelerated to secure loans. So the effect of raising interest rates is to increase the borrowing costs for most of the regional economies. And this could actually lead to a debt crisis in the months and years ahead. Already, because of some of the high import bills, the external positions are being affected. If you look at the right graph there showing the exchange rates for South Africa, Zambia, and Malawi, the exchange rates have been depreciating, mostly because of the high import bills. We know South Africa has a very strong export base, but the import bill is going to suffer. And the slowdown in industrial production of China has also not been good for our region, because export demand for a lot of the merchandise products was affected. So the trading accounts gets affected, the exchange rates get affected as well. I would want to hand it back to Godfrey. Thank you.
Thanks very much, Jones, for that update. I guess, ladies and gentlemen, what we have seen today on these areas is quite more detailed, and I'm hoping that we managed to follow the discussions. And I think it's fair for us to have questions at this point in time. I just want to leave this time for any of us who have questions, comments, and reflections based on the two presentations that have just been shared. I'm trying to check if there's anything in the chat box. So far, there is nothing. So over to us, ladies and gentlemen. I see there's something from Hein. He's asking if we have seed prices, and also do we have trend information, and could it affect planning for next season? Sipo and Jones, any one of you with some good response on that, I think that would be very good. And Hein, that's a very good question, given that in the near future we are moving into the next season. So certainly this information is important. So over to you, Jones and Sipo.
Thank you. Thanks, Godfrey. I'll just come in on the seed prices. We hadn't prepared anything specifically for this meeting, but we can surely prepare something and then disseminate it either via email to the members. Would that be fine, Hein? Because I would still need to gather some of the information from the country offices.
That would be very much appreciated. Thank you so much.
Okay, great. I will do so.
Yeah,
And
let
Jones,
me
by
also
any chance, do you have something?
Yeah, let me also add that production costs for seed, we know the intensity of inputs required for seed production. Production costs are going up. Fertilizer prices have gone up. Crop chemical, inputs have also gone up. So we anticipate elevated seed prices, and yeah, it could affect demand. But fortunately, we also have high producer prices. So to the extent that farmers can accommodate the rise in seed, the area planted in the coming seasons may not be significantly affected by high seed cost prices. But we have to put all these things together and see how they pan out. But the indications do suggest that, yes, output prices will remain elevated. Over to you, Godfrey.
All right, thanks, Pedro, for that. Colleagues, any more questions for Sipo and Jones? I don't seem to see any hands, neither am I seeing any messages in the chat box. But I think just looking at the way the two presentations progressed, I guess we have a lot of work to do, as I kind of foresee a very confusing situation. I guess in the past it was quite clear what we were working with. The shocks were quite clear, but I think what's happening around Ukraine and Russia is further complicating our situation, and we may kind of expect some surprises moving ahead. And I guess it's gonna be more difficult for the upcoming season. Obviously, if the conflict is prolonged, we certainly are going to see more and more impacts on this for that particular season. So certainly we need to keep our eyes open on that. Having said this, I'm just going to switch over to Hein, who is going to provide us with a briefing on countries of concern. So over to you, Hein.
Sorry, Godfrey, there was a hand up from Lulamisa.
Oh, my apologies. I didn't see that one. If you could quickly come up with your question before we move on to Hein.
Good morning, everyone, and thank you. For me, it's not really a question, it was just a comment, but I think you touched on it to say that this is of major concerns. I mean, the trends are really of concern and showing that for me, it places emphasis to say that we need to put in interventions and work in a collaborative manner because honestly, this is scary. The future seems to be scary and uncertain. So we need more knowledge sharing, good practices, sustainable actions, resilience building, capacity building. And yeah, that's just all I wanted to say. Thank you.
Thank you very much for that comment. And certainly that's a very relevant comment. There's more and more need for us to probably improve on our collaboration, our coordination. Certainly, we need to put our hands together. Thanks for that comment. And over to you, Hein.
Thank you so much. And good morning, colleagues. This is the first time I am presenting on behalf of WFP in this forum, and it's my pleasure to be here today. I just want to check, do you have my presentation, facilitators, or should I be projecting? Because I think I did share it a bit earlier. I just want to double check.
Did you share another one this morning?
Yes, but it's the same one as yesterday. So I just
Oh
wanted
no,
to
I might not have seen the one from this morning, but you're welcome to share.
In that case, let me share my screen just in case. Thank you so much. I really appreciate that. Just 1 second. And I will make sure this is quite brief. I feel like a great deal has already been said, and I definitely do not want to repeat anything. We are all very pressed for time here. So I just want to hit a couple of highlights, and I may repeat, but I'll really try to be brief. And I think this is a reiteration, this slide that's now in front of us, of how the season performed. Um, this is WFP's drought hotspot map. It identifies areas that have been affected by drought throughout the rain season. On the right-hand side, we see last year's, and we see that some of the region experienced quite a few drought hotspots of a high level. But if we looked at this year, March 2022, as we ended the rainfall season, we can see that quite a number of countries experienced significant and severe drought hotspots, and these have already been referenced. But effectively, we're looking at the eastern part of the region. So Zimbabwe has been very much affected compared to last year, but the situation in Madagascar has, if anything, worsened. Similarly, the dry conditions that were experienced in northern Mozambique in 2021 have pretty much spread to larger parts of the region. And whilst the drought situation in Angola has improved somewhat, we still have poor rainfall experience, and especially the southern area. So I just wanted to share this product with colleagues, as it is a useful way of at least assessing what we can expect going forward. And I think this was very much echoed by what's been presented before. Now, I think this is an interesting slide, not in that there's new information here, but this is globally what is the perspective on the region. Here we have the early warning hunger hotspots. This is a product that's issued twice a year, I believe, jointly with FAO and WFP. And globally, this is how our region is seen. We have a number of countries of concern: Angola, Zimbabwe, Mozambique, and Madagascar. And these are the countries of main concern looking at the region. And of course, a lot has already been said about what's going on in these countries. But in Angola, we're looking at another consecutive dry season, high food prices, high inflation, high poverty. And of course, this year is an election year in Angola. So that always makes things a little bit more complicated, and there is a risk of unrest. Similarly, in DRC, unfortunately, we see the effects of intensified conflict over the coming months, especially in North Kivu and Ituri, where displacement continues. Very, very high food prices, and it's continuing to increase with population movements. If we look at Madagascar, and I think this has also been discussed at length, but both the drought as well as the numerous cyclones that affected Madagascar this season is going to have an impact on food security. And then, of course, we have Mozambique, where we are seeing an increase in unrest in the north, where the sporadic attacks of 2021 are becoming more frequent, and where cyclones also have affected hundreds of thousands of people. And then we have Zimbabwe, which of course is experiencing a protracted economic crisis, as well as looking at the poor rainfall that it experienced. We have major causes for concern. And if I could add a country, apologies. If I could add a country to this group of 4 countries, it would be Malawi. Mainly because of the impact of some tropical cyclones that managed to reach all the way into southern Malawi. For us, I think that as a country of elevated concern too, although it didn't reach that level of concern to be included in this hunger hotspot report. It's definitely on my watch list. So I thought I'd just give you that perspective globally. It's always interesting to know how we are being seen compared to the rest of the world and the rest of Africa. So, of course, this is where we are in the region. We are now the post-harvest period, and most of our food insecurity data goes up to March. So last year we ended up, or March, we ended up with about 50.5 million. Now, most member states, as we know, do not issue IPC numbers for this period of time, this post-harvest period, but we do have some figures from Madagascar, Mozambique, and Tanzania that already gives one an idea of what's to come. And I think what's of particular concern is the fact that while Madagascar is going into the post-harvest period of plenty, I could say, it's actually seeing an increase in food insecurity and IPC 3+. And we can already see that Madagascar will go above the 2 million mark IPC 3+. And I wouldn't be surprised if that number gets revised upward later in the year. So we're very much now in the wait and see period. We know that we aren't expecting things to improve. We are expecting a worsening of conditions. So now the key for us is really to wait for the assessments that are currently ongoing to be completed. So I'm just quickly sharing this assessment calendar to give colleagues an idea of where the various member states are in conducting vulnerability assessments. It is clear that our synthesis report, of course, everybody knows that the SADC produces a synthesis report in July that provides the analysis and the numbers for the region as a whole. If I look at the assessment calendar, I think that comprehensive picture may be a bit delayed simply by looking at when we can expect these assessments to be completed. Many of them have a deadline of early August, whereas we would have hoped that most of them were already done so that we could have a figure in early July. So whilst there will be work done on producing this synthesis report in early July with the data we have available, I can already see that synthesis report will also have an update, probably mid-August, when we have more detailed information. I can also just report that SADC has convened the synthesis report drafting team. I'm sure a few colleagues on the call are part of that team, and if you are interested in being part of that team, just drop me an email and I will connect you with SADC. But effectively, it's for stakeholders who have an interest in supporting SADC and producing this report based on the inputs as we receive them from the member states. So that's really all I wanted to say now. And of course, I'm happy to take any questions. Thank you, and over.
Colleagues, let's feel free to intervene on Haynes' update. I don't seem to see any questions so far, and I'm not seeing anyone raising their hand, so I guess we are all satisfied with what Haynes has just provided. Did I miss anyone?
Yeah, I guess I did a good job, but I'm happy to take any questions. And of course, if any colleagues have questions after this meeting, please feel free to contact me. But thank you so much for the opportunity to present.
Yeah, thanks very much, Hein, for that update. I guess one of the things that I just picked from the presentation is that seemingly late assessment schedule. Usually, by the time we meet for the dissemination, we pretty much have most of the countries having completed the assessments, but it does look like this time around that may not be the case. And I guess once again, this calls for us to probably do a little bit more work. Obviously, those who make decisions, those who want to make some kind of programming decisions will certainly be coming on us for information, whereas their assessments won't be complete. And I guess this means we need to do a lot of groundwork, use whatever information, whatever sources we have to try and kind of come up with a narrative of how the situation is going to evolve. So we certainly need to keep our eyes and ears on the ground to make sure that whatever information that we get in our numbers, we certainly know that there are organizations that are more closer to the ground. We need to get as much information as possible and at least be able to answer to some of the questions that may be coming up, which others may want to use for shaping up their programs. So having said that, I think I'll leave this time to an update on nutrition. So I guess it's Marjorie providing us with the presentation. Also, sorry, I see it's Tracy. So over to you, Tracy.
Thank you, Godfrey. Good morning, everyone. Marjorie is unable to join us today, so I will be doing the presentation on behalf of WFP and UNICEF. And as usual, in our presentation, we focus on the first 5 or so countries, and then the rest of the presentation can be shared with the participants afterwards, and you can read on the updates for the other countries. You can go to the next slide, please. So in a summary, the emergency countries, we are still looking at a sustained emergency nutrition situation. And like what everyone else is saying, we are seeing the effects of the Ukraine crisis that has increased the prices of other UTF commodities that we use for treatment of severe acute malnutrition. And we are also seeing increasing admission trends in Angola, Malawi, and Namibia. And amidst all this, we have huge funding gaps in Angola and Malawi. And I think in general, it's becoming more and more difficult for all the country offices to find funding for the nutrition programs. And the prevention actions remain low and underfunded. You can go to the next slide. There you see the admission trends, but I think you will see them again also when we go to the specific countries. So for Angola, the summer admissions in 2022 are higher than admissions in 2021 for the same time period, with over 40,000 children admitted, and about 120,000 children have been screened, and 60,000 children have received vitamin supplementation. And The IPC assessment is pending funding from the partners, so it has not taken off. In Madagascar, generally, we are seeing an improved nutrition situation when compared to 2021. So that's a typo. There was a peak in April in Madagascar, but the expected numbers of malnourished children is low. And then smart surveys and mass screenings are ongoing. And then in Malawi, the two partners, WFP and UNICEF, have continued to provide support, life-saving nutrition support across the countries. And overall, there is a 31% increase in admissions, and also 183% increase in mom admissions, which is also quite concerning and worrying. You can go to the next slide. This
Sorry, do I have a do I have the right version?
yeah,
Let's see. Tracy, I only see 2 slides and then
you only see 2 slides because I wanted to go deeper into countries like Mozambique, DRC, and Madagascar. So maybe I can open from here.
Okay, you can do
Okay, okay. I see this one that you just shared, and then I'll ask you to also share the Mozambique one. Maybe you can, since in the country highlights I spoke about Angola, can you share the Mozambique slide and the DRC ones? Just
that.
those
Okay,
two.
this one.
This one. Okay, so in Mozambique, we know that there are two main issues: the conflict in the north and also the after effects of the cyclones. So the smart surveys are also going on in Mozambique, and there are a lot of activities ongoing for Mozambique. We have the integrated mobile brigades, which are outreach services to enable more and more children to be admitted into the SAM and mom treatment programs. And then we also have the HRP 2022 has been released, and then also the emergency response plan for Cyclone Gombe has been released. So the funding in the pipeline, about 1 million from BHA is expected to cover IUTF, and then also about 2 million euro from ECHO to cover also IUTF, and then also to cover Cyclone Gombe, about 155,000 from Japan. Of course, there is a lot of displacement, and then also restrictions, and the needs in Mozambique also keep on increasing due to the cyclones and due to the conflict in the north. And the Ministry of Health has declared a national public health emergency on the 18th of May due to the new polio outbreak. You can go to the next slide on Mozambique. There were 2 slides. Yeah, and then also from WFP, like I said, WFP continues with the mom management of children, and then also with the blanket supplementary feeding program for children and for POWs, as well as the Gombe cyclone response and the SBCC campaign. So quite a lot happening in Mozambique, but with also a lot of challenges, including access due to the conflict, and a lot of displacement as well as funding issues. Maybe I can also talk about DRC. Can you project the slide on DRC? So DRC is also another country of concern for nutrition. The armed conflicts and international tensions that have escalated significantly during the reporting period, the tensions between the country and Rwanda, also Ugandan disagreements, and conflicts in North Kivu, Ituri, and South Kivu. So also WFP has been struggling to meet 100% of the reach because of these conflicts, and also unavailability of other food commodities in the basket. So as you can see, in all these areas where the conflict is ongoing, WFP's reach has been very low compared to the expected or the planned reach. So I want to stop here. We have more countries in the slide: Eswatini, Malawi, Namibia, as well as Zimbabwe and Zambia. But you can read for yourselves after the meeting. The presentation will be shared with you all. Thank you for your time and for listening. Over to you, Godfrey.
Tracy, for that presentation, touching on some of the countries that are certainly areas of concern in the region. And colleagues, it's time for us to give reflections to what Tracy has just presented. Questions, comments? I'm seeing there's one question from Killian in the chat box. He's saying,
Yes.
Thank you for the presentation, Tracy. Could you please provide a bit more detail on what is driving up some cases in Malawi and which districts are the most affected?
Okay, thanks, Killian. I can provide information later on which districts are the most affected, but I want to go back to the food security and the food prices updates. As you can see, Malawi was also one of the countries that was affected by cyclones, and also the issue of a poor harvest compared to what has been expected, and the general trends from the Ukraine-Russia are also pushing the cases of some. It's not only in Malawi where we have observed this, we have also observed this even in Namibia. Right now, WFP and UNICEF are working on programs where they can also start soup kitchens for the under 5 children in some districts in Namibia. So this is an ongoing trend, but I can come back to you later with the exact details on the districts which are most affected. Over to you, Godfrey.
All right, thanks. I also see a hand from Antonio. Antonio, how are you? Long time. Please go ahead with your question.
Good morning to everyone. Just some update from Angola. We have planned to run the post-harvest food security assessment, including also nutrition. So we are supporting government. The assessment will be coordinated by the Minister of Agriculture. We are in process of finalizing the work plan. So there are funds, there are partners that are going to support the assessment: UNICEF, WFP, FAO, and the World Vision. And also OCHA is still doing some advocacy if we can get more, because we would like to increase the sample in terms of the number of municipalities to be covered by the assessment. So I think by the end of this week, we'll have a clear plan in terms of which are the municipality that will be part of the assessment and which one will benefit from food security assessment and also nutrition assessment. Some of them may have only food security assessment due to fund constraints. I think by Friday we'll have a clear picture of a plan and the sample size of the post-harvest assessment. We have some issues with regard to the elections. So Angola is having election on 24th of August. So we are not sure yet how this will impact in our activity, the assessment that we are planning to begin in January. So the data collection activity in July, sorry, in next month, July, and most likely the IPC August, maybe beginning of September. But now with the elections, we have to see if this can take place very close to election or after elections. So we still have to decide, but I think at the end of this year, we can have a clear decision. Thank you. I just wanted to share.
Thanks, Antonio, for that update and how we wish, the Angola IPC could move ahead. I guess it will certainly help us to get more information given the sort of issues we have been seeing related to food security and nutrition in Angola. So we all hope that things will go as planned, and we'll certainly begin to see how the analysis goes. I don't seem to see any additional hand at this point in time, and I guess, Tracy, this could mean there is satisfaction with your presentation. I guess we should move over now to our next agenda item. I'm just trying to double check here if I didn't miss anything on the chat box, and also from any of the members. Yep, it looks like we are all good to go. So the next agenda item, we are now on AOB, and I guess there's a discussion on resilience thematic session. We all know last year that we had, I think, 2 sessions on resilience, and the idea was that given what we are seeing in the region, resilience becomes an important subject to whatever that we are doing, and there was some agreement that part of this discussion will be led by the FNSWG. So we are thinking that we are coming from a very busy time where seasonal issues, update issues dominated the agenda. And I think as we move to probably August, September, we might kind of see a slight free space, obviously, because somehow it's not as busy. So we wanted to find out if it is the best time for us to resume with discussions around resilience. I still think and believe it's important for us to keep this agenda moving. Obviously, for those of us who have been in the region for a long time, we've seen how the issues that we keep discussing keep coming year in and year out, meaning that these things are going to stay with us. But the more we understand resilience issues, the better for the region, and even for those that are doing some programming around resilience, I guess is going to be part of the answer to some of these issues that we keep on seeing year in, year out. So I
Godfrey, you are no longer audible.
Oh, my apologies. I think I lost network for a few minutes. All right. So I was just explaining that I think we need to keep this agenda moving. And I wanted to just find out from members if we have the same feeling, if we have the same thinking that we need to resume our discussions and our thematic session on resilience. And I guess the timing we were kind of looking at is maybe August or September. So we just wanted to run this by you so that we can start the preparations on those who are going to facilitate the discussions and the resources that we need for this. So wanted to just find out if there are any reflections on that.
Hi, Godfrey. I think it's a good idea that we should resume those conversations, as when we have a long break, then we lose the momentum. But if we continually have this, probably with regularity, some form of regularity, whether it's quarterly or every 2 months or something like that, it will help us to ensure that we have key actions that we can follow up on, and also support our field offices in implementing some of the outcomes from those discussions.
Thanks very much, Maxwell. Point well noted. I guess it has always been the plan to have these discussions on quarterly basis, but I guess the start of the year was a little bit heavy with cyclones and a lot of things happening in the region. So we ended up kind of sidetracking, but point well noted. And thank you very much for confirming something that we need to pursue. Anyone else with any contribution to that? I don't seem to see anyone else here raising their hand, and so allow me to take that our silence is accepting the proposed idea that we need to move on with that thematic session. So what we are going to do is just like we handled it last year, there was a team that was selected to lead this process. We're going to re-engage that team, and then we'll come up with a structure on how we are going to move ahead, and we'll certainly share that on time. And we might reach out to some of the members on this platform to request for some contributions for some topics or facilitation on some of the topics. So I think that's about it on resilience, on the resilience thematic session. And just to also let you know in advance that as FNSWG, we have it on our plans to have some kind of a planning retreat. We have tried to keep delaying it, hoping that the improvements and the gains that we are seeing in the COVID situation will remain like that, so that we can actually have it in person. And so we are trying to probably push it around November, and we are hoping by that time things would have improved. So we do have plans to have a planning session for the working group, and November is our targeted time for now. And it's on condition that the COVID-19 situation will certainly improve better than what it is right now. And the plans are that we should meet physically. Apart from that, I don't have any A or B item at this point in time. So if there's anyone with anything that they would want the group to know, feel free to just share it. Otherwise, we'll move ahead with the closure of today's session. So anyone with any additional A or B?
Hello, good morning.
Morning, please go ahead.
Thank you so much. This is Kifilwe calling from the African Union Development Agency, known as NAPAD. I just wanted to share information on the AU Year of Nutrition, that we are collaborating more and more with partners to celebrate this year, especially at national level. So we have developed a schedule from the AU and the partners that we're going to have a high-level meeting with King of Lesotho, King Lesia the third. He's the AU Nutrition Champion. And so we will be launching the Year of Nutrition in Lesotho first week of August, second to the 3rd of August. And in there we have also ALN, Africa's for Leaders Nutrition Champions, in collaboration with also Sun Movement Champions to celebrate this year. So I'll share more and more information and when the concept note is actually developed with a detailed program, I will share with you. Some of the partners here present are also involved in the planning session, such as the FAO East Africa office, and also the Africa office based in Accra, and also World Food Program. Over.
Thanks very much, Fifi, for that update. It's been a long time hearing you, and thanks very much for coming up with something new. So, colleagues, let's support as much as we can once the information becomes available.
Yeah. And in the next, Chair, through you, in the next session, I don't mind to make a presentation. We have developed a roadmap on the Year of Nutrition. So if you allow, I can make a presentation on that so that partners where they have interest, they can join us in celebrating the year. Thank you.
Sure, we're more than happy to have that, Fifi, and thanks a lot.
Thank you, sir.
All right, ladies and gentlemen, we are 30 minutes. We have 30 minutes to spare, and I think that's a good culture. In the past, we are coming from a past where we've been battling, being late, eating into your time, but I'm happy that today we've actually 30 minutes, we've spared 30 minutes of your time. So as usual, we are going to consolidate whatever discussions that we've had today, and we are going to then come up with a single presentation that we will make on Thursday by Riasco. So the next few hours will be busy for us, but we'll try to work out something that summarizes whatever we've discussed. And at this note, I just want to wish us all the best. And I forgot to mention that Gracia is not with us today. She's not feeling well. She has been in hospital, so we are hoping that she will have a speed recovery. Otherwise, ladies and gentlemen, all the best. And for those who attend the RIASCO meeting, we look forward to seeing you on Thursday. Otherwise, we'll meet you same period in July. Thank you and bye-bye.
Thank you, Chair.
Bye.
Bye-bye.
Bye.
Thank you, everyone.
Thank
Bye.
you. All the best. Bye. Ciao.